Well, good evening, and here we are, episode 26. And ironically, what we're talking about is switching off and unplugging. But don't do that just yet, because we want you to watch this and then tell us what you thought. If it's nice, if it's not nice, you can unplug and switch off. So, we've been told a lot, and it's one of these things that we hear a lot, that we should unplug and switch off, particularly devices, etc., when it comes to our self-care and well-being. And I think that personally, I find that a good thing to do, because you just have to start scrolling 2 minutes because somebody sent you an interesting post, and suddenly it's 4 o'clock in the morning and you're supposed to be up at 6. And that happens a lot. And I think that's possibly an electronic insomnia situation, but who knows? So I'm going to throw the question out: how do we all switch off and unplug to get ourselves into a state of rebalancing our energies? I'm going to start with Tony.
For me, I think, Leslie, it's doing some mindfulness and some journaling together. So for me, I start with writing a couple of things down that I've done that day that I feel good about, things maybe that I've overcame, some things that I thought was going to be a challenge. And if I've overcame that, I put them down. And I do that now, a little bit of mindfulness just to clear anything out from that day. And I finish it off with just listening to some music. I'm very eclectic when it comes to music though, because I can have quite a few to taste from about the last 40 years. But it seems to be a combination of all three. So the journaling clears everything out of my mind. Then the mindfulness just calms it down. And then I just re-energise, I get ready for the next day with the music.
And I think possibly what we should do is introduce ourselves as well first, because I've totally unplugged from that. So Tony, who are you and what do you do?
I'm Tony Gordon, company's Change Your Mind Limited. I'm a growth mindset coach. I work with individuals and groups, educating them in new resources and techniques so they can empower themselves to actually then take back control of their lives or finding new goals and aspirations they want to work towards.
And that now makes it totally explained as to why you use your mindfulness, and that's what we're doing. So Willie.
Thanks, Leslie. My name is Willie Nicol. I'm a life coach. What does that mean? Hard to explain, actually. I just help people with their stuff, because everyone has stuff. We all have stuff in our lives we don't want, the stuff we don't want more of. I use words like stuff and things because I don't like to use words like issues and problems, which are inherently negative. And we've all got things, right? And sometimes we need help with these things. So essentially what I do is I help people with their things, anything that's blocking their development or stopping them getting the results they want in their life. And that could encompass anxiety, stress, loss of confidence, loss of motivation, to whatever. And talking of using social media, one of my clients, when I asked him what he was guilty of wasting his time on, and he used the phrase doom scrolling. And I said, okay. I said, you get on the old Facebook or whatever, and that's you for the next hour. And one of the reasons we're talking was time management. And we had to do a bit of work around that. Anyway, that's what I do. I help people with their stuff. So if you have any stuff or things you want looked at, please get in touch.
And how do you get rid of your stuff? How do you switch off? Not the stuff.
Get rid of my stuff, right? Well, alcohol is usually quite good. And I know Angela didn't want me to talk about that. No, I do switch off my computer, put my phone away, go for a walk, sit in there. We have a very nice office with some crystals in it, sit in there and have a wee bit of, I guess, mindfulness, as Tony said. Maybe listen to meditation or a bit of music or read a book. Just get away from the toil and strife and the hubble and bubble of life, because if you keep on looking at your phone or reading the newspapers or whatever, that's not a good recipe for being calm and going to bed, and you can't get to sleep because your mind's churning. So switching off and unplugging, particularly after a hard day, is absolutely imperative. If you want to get a good night's sleep, and B, you don't want to be up half the night and walking about, raiding the fridge, whatever it is.
Mary, what about you?
Well, I'm another coach, and I coach people who get overwhelmed, and oftentimes they can't switch off and they struggle to be unplugged. But I'm a little bit odd. I sometimes use my phone to get unplugged because I actually love doing Sudokus or crosswords. And I was there, lots of people say to me, do the breathing, do the, and I was like, no, I want another part of my brain to be engaged. So I can't be thinking about the things that have been bugging me if I'm figuring out whether it's a 7 or a 3 or a 2. And it's very simple, it's uncomplicated, and it doesn't intrude on anybody. And what's interesting is I tend to do that first, then maybe do some breathing, and then I can do the journaling, because then it really highlights what was really good during the day. So I do it in the reverse order to what Tony does. So I actually find it, so I'm not totally in saying switch off all the technology. If it works for you, you use it. What I hate doing is saying you must or you should. If you want to unplug, it's whatever works for you. That's my key phrase. So that's where I'm at with it, is very much finding what people need that works for them.
It's really ironic how many meditation and mindfulness apps there are on the phone.
Exactly, and the same people are telling you should switch off your app.
Yeah. I think
everybody needs to spend time finding what's right for them.
Yeah.
And for me, and I'm very clear why things like Sudokus or crossword puzzles actually work for me, and it's to do with the part of my brain that engages, and it's very, very clear why it works for me.
I like a crossword puzzle myself, but I cannot do Sudoku because it would just drive me up the wall.
I'm the same as me. I do them every day. I do Sudoku cross every day. My wife always told me she can't understand why I do that so much when I'm on, especially when I worked in the bank, because then I was dealing with data all day long, and I'd come home and do a crossword or do a Sudoku, and she couldn't figure it out. But I'm still like, Mary, it's the way my brain settles down. I need something to do that, because I think it's right. It blocks all the other thoughts from coming through because I'm concentrating so much on that, and it takes that away. So it keeps that conscious side of my mind occupied to let the other side just deal with everything else.
Yeah.
So Angela.
First of all, I'm going to ask, what on earth are you doing that means you've got to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning? That's the first thing that needs to go. Right? I don't do mornings. Yeah, so I'm an energetic transformational coach. So a little bit of what Mary and Willie have said, and a little bit of what Tony said as well. I do use a different couple of modalities that are energy based to tune into people's bodies to understand what's going on for them. And what I'm currently focusing on at the moment is catching stress and overwhelm before it becomes burnout. Especially since I've now discovered recently that burnout is actually now categorized by the WHO as a disease, which I didn't know until last week when I was watching Grey's Anatomy. So that's a whole new one on me. So yeah, before you get to burnout, come and see me, is my theory at the moment. As far as unplugging goes, I'm a little bit like Mary, I don't unplug. So my ways to unplug, I've got a journaling app. I listen to music on my phone or connected to the device in my living room that then plays on the other side of the room. And I read books through an e-reader. So if I want to completely unplug, my ways of doing that aren't as easy. And while, yes, I understand that for some people journaling, it's the energy behind actually writing stuff out, I do find that typing things are just as good, or verbalizing things are just as good for me. So it's about finding the right thing. Exactly as Mary said, you've got to find what works for you. So me telling you, you've got to switch everything off and do this, that, and the next thing isn't going to work for everyone. It might work for 2 or 3 people, but everyone else is going to be sitting there going to me, away jump. That's not what works for me. And I think if someone was to say to me to unplug everything, I know I get a lot from music. I get a lot from listening to music, to singing along to it, to dancing around the living room, whatever the option is. And I think for me, that needs to be as part of my daily life, because it feeds a part of my soul, just like sitting reading a book and completely unplugging from life while completely getting engrossed in whatever the book is, whether that is reading it from whichever e-reader or listening to an audiobook, but there's still tech involved. So, but then my background in tech, so I don't mind too much.
Probably a generational thing, Angela. When you get to my age, I could quite cheerfully chuck the iPhone somewhere. I also do crosswords. I don't know, I do crosswords at night because, as Tony said, it kind of engages one part of your mind, and then when you get it done, you feel a sense of achievement. And if I don't,
So I've never completed a crossword, so that wouldn't be my forte. I'd be more the Sudokus.
if I didn't complete it, I used to get quite annoyed about it, but now I couldn't care less. And I mean, Mary's right. It's whatever works for you. I don't do audiobooks. If I'm going to read, if I'm going to consume, I want a bit of paper and cardboard or whatever in front of me. Same with if I'm reading a newspaper, I want a bit of paper in front of me. I don't want to read it on an app. Just one of these things. But
I don't have the money or the storage space for the number of books I read.
right, okay. I'm quite picky and choosy when it comes to books. Another thing I've found, and maybe I shouldn't say this, you can actually download PDF versions of books for free if you find the right book and the right website, and apparently it's all legal. So just something to think about. But that means I've got to read it on a screen. So I've just contradicted myself there. But anyway.
Just download it, Willie, then print it off, and then you've got it in your paper style.
Good point.
On that one, I've discovered an app recently called Borrow Box. So if you go to your local library, you can register with your local library, and you've got access to the library books without having to pay extra for them, as well as audiobooks. So that's quite a nice one to have a look at if anyone's wanting to read more books and doesn't want to pay for them.
But I think it's interesting. It's one of the things I find really interesting recently is this: everybody's saying people need to, the musts and the should, and you shouldn't do this, and you shouldn't have tech, and you shouldn't have, and don't do this, and don't do that. It doesn't work. The brain doesn't work with that sort of negative don't do.
Everybody's unique. You have to find their own way.
And I think that is the biggest key to getting unplugged, is taking the time to understanding what unplugged actually means to you in the first instance. So and I would have family members who would do very intense historical tours and art galleries as their holidays, so that they're learning stuff and they're learning new stuff, and they love it. I might like to visit the art galleries, but I'd probably do it at 3 times the speed, because I wouldn't have to, I'd look at the picture, do I like it? I don't need to know the whole history of it. They do. And I think that this idea of find out what you need, what does unplugged actually look like for you first, and then you can find what works for you.
What about you, Leslie? You've not said what you do.
Yeah.
Oh, well, being an holistic coach, basically, I'll go for anything from NLP to complete woo-woo. And it's the woo-woo part, the hippy-dippy stuff, that actually I love to do, that helps me to unplug. That really is unplugging. That's unplugging from everything. But also going into the garden and gardening. When my hands are busy in the garden, or I'm totally focused on one thing in the garden, particularly reading is really good at the moment. The brain stops working. Time goes away. In fact, if it wasn't for my husband coming out saying, do you want some coffee? I wouldn't even know what time of day it was. He's like clockwork. You can set your watch by him when it comes to tea and coffee and lunch. But it's one of those things that the other day I was in the garden and I didn't even realize I'd been in there for 4 hours. Apart from the fact that I got a hell of a lot done. It looked entirely different from when I started. But I found myself in a corner going, how did that happen? Because it just became like, well, it's like a gardening trance. When it comes to audiobooks, I will listen to audiobooks, but I tend to go off down rabbit holes with them. When I'm listening to something and I hear a phrase or a term, part of my brain jumps on it. And it's like, oh, what does that mean? How could that work? How do you say that a different way? Where will that go? And suddenly I can't hear the book anymore.
That's what the pause button's for.
I don't have a pause button. I can't, if there's a pause button on my phone, I have no idea. Because it's usually in my back pocket by that time and the audiobook is on while I'm gardening. So I'm trying to multitask at the same time. Crosswords, I do like crosswords. I like the non-threatening ones that are not totally, you know, you have to take your eyeballs out individually to uncross them by the time you've looked at the cryptic clue thing going on. I used to like one a crossword in a Sunday newspaper that was all general knowledge. Well, it wasn't really that much of a general knowledge. We got into a habit, my friends and I, when I was living in London, I used to go to my friends there on a Sunday and we would look at this thing. And there were like pairs, general knowledge books on gods and goddesses and Romans and history. And then there was the dictionaries and all this. And we used to sit and pore over these. And we would spend like 3 hours or something like that trying to do this giant crossword. And it was just fun. It was a way to spend a post lunch on a Sunday, and just working at it together was a great thing to do. We weren't watching the telly, we weren't watching the phones weren't on. Actually, most of this happened before mobile phones actually existed, but at the same time, it was a really nice way to spend time, learn things, and keep your brain moving. And I think that's part of the issue with the unplugging. We get a little bit too sometimes worried about how much we're doing in one place and how much we're doing in another place, and that's a stressor in itself. Is once you say they should, couldn't, wouldn't, don't do that. I mean, I don't know about you, whenever somebody tells me not to eat something, I start to hanker for it.
No one likes to be told. No one likes to be told what to do.
Yeah.
And I used to do it for a living as a police officer, but I could get away with that. The ultimate sanction was you're getting in jail. However, no one likes to be told what to do. And words like should, must, need to, have to, very kind of negative. The old phrase, a change is as good as a rest, springs to mind. So at the end of your whatever day, whatever you're doing, do something different.
I think you probably know that you've got a problem if you drop out of Wi-Fi and you have a panic attack.
Well, Zoom went down yesterday and apparently it was horrendous. I missed a couple of calls and well, that's the way it goes, but people are stacking up.
So I didn't care.
Yeah, I think it was the whole of Europe went down for about an hour or so.
Disaster, Armageddon. Good gift.
Yeah,
there's always alternatives, right?
Yeah.
Well, I was supposed to be in a Zoom call there and that didn't work. Then it was a Google something or other and that didn't work. And I thought, that's it, I'll give it up. They can do it without me, thank you.
And how good did it feel just to unplug and not be worried
Well,
about
that's it. I just, there you go, did something else.
Well, I think it's all this FOMO carry on, fear of missing out, because there's so many things that we could be doing. And of course, now we can stream things that we don't even know exist from beginning to end in one sitting if we want to. And that happens a lot. And I think that also is interesting for some people.
I'm going to suggest you switch FOMO for JOMO, which is the joy of missing out.
Yeah.
And actually choosing what you want to miss out on, because we don't need to do everything and our lives are not long enough to do absolutely everything. But I think one of the points you made there, Leslie, about actually sitting down with some friends and working through a crossword puzzle, whatever else, something that none of us have mentioned, but actually the last time I was getting that stressy way that I felt I really needed the unplug, I went for a walk with a friend. She wasn't beside me, she was on the phone with me, but we both went for a walk and we both enjoyed the countryside and whatever else, and we were seeing completely different views, but we had that camaraderie and that conversation piece of bouncing ideas off of people, being distracted by their thought processes and my thought process, and coming to that decision or understanding of somebody else's viewpoint of what crap was going on in here. And I think that's something that a lot of people have missed out on over the last few years, but also don't value as much as perhaps would be worthwhile valuing.
Yeah, there's the black and white element of it, but it's the good thing of it is that it used to be that if you walked down the road seemingly talking to yourself, you were deemed to be totally nuts. Now it's absolutely okay. Everybody thinks you're on your phone.
And then nobody stops to talk to you, which is great. If you want to be antisocial, it's brilliant. Just talk to yourself, sing along to your headphones, right?
I will admit that there have been times that I have put my earplugs in and it has not been attached to my phone, so that people can see the earplugs and they don't bother me.
I tried that before, but I actually get cut out because I forgot to plug the other end into my phone, and it was dangling out to the side of my jumper. And I put it on to another person. Never even thought about it. I just went that. Put it up, I must have steps and knocked it out. So I was pretending I was doing it. And then you went, next time plug it in, it would help. And I looked down, it was actually sticking out.
I think though there's something really interesting there, because when I think of unplugged, I'm not engaged with other people. Whereas for others, unplugged, there is an engagement with other people who are not either your normal family or your normal workmates. So I think there's something interesting there, that unplugged can be so very definitely. My unplugged is alone time. I'm on my own. It's stuff for me. It's away from things
For me,
rather than engaging.
It's about boundaries. I mean, now that we're working globally to a certain extent, it's very easy for us to answer an email at 9 o'clock at night because it's there and we know that their time, it's like lunchtime or something for them, thereabouts. But at the same time, on the other hand, they will know that it's 9 o'clock at night where we are. So there should be some kind of balance that goes on. And I really must admit, I've tended to, when it comes to a certain time of night, I just don't answer emails. I don't even look at them.
God, I've never
and there
looked
you
at
go,
them.
shooting all over yourself again.
But you know what? That's my choice. I want to look after my time. I want to look after my space.
Yeah, but I think it's for me, it's so like what Lee was saying, I have done my very best to remove the word should from my vocabulary. So I'm trying, that's another one I've tried not to use, try. I am working through in a way of avoiding those words as much as possible because I don't think that they serve me. So you should stop replying emails, or is it beneficial for you to stop replying to emails?
Well, I just stopped replying to them. I stopped looking at them.
Yeah. I won't look in the morning, but I'll look in the afternoon and into the evening.
Oh yeah, I don't do anything in the morning before 10:30.
No, I'm saying morning at all. You send me an email, don't expect to reply till after lunchtime.
Yeah, although
I've got half my day's work done by that time.
Yeah, but you see, the thing is, I'm a night owl, and I will actually send emails out at 4 o'clock in the morning because I'm up. But I don't expect people to actually answer them. It's just that basically the way my brain works, if I don't write it down there and then, I will not write it down at all. Because part of my brain unplugged at one point, somewhere around about the age of 45.
Oh no, it's coming soon for me.
yeah, you don't get away with it.
What do you young whippersnappers know, right? If I've got an email to send and I can't be able to send it, I just write a wee note saying, send this email in the morning. I have a little notepad beside my bed in case I have any blinding insights. As you do, you're just about to nod off, and this great idea for a blog or a post comes, and you're definitely not doing it then. So a bit of pen, a wee bit of paper, and then you scribble something down in the morning, you look at it and say, what is that all about?
I used to do that, but I write like a doctor, so I can never read more writing in the morning what I wrote. So I bought a wee dictaphone, it's tiny, right. And I have that, and I can just talk it in and play it back and go, never know what it is, but if I write it, forget it. No one can never read it.
And the beauty of that is you don't even have to open your eyes.
Exactly. Well, I've chosen that if it's a good enough thought, it will still be there in the morning. I'm doing nothing.
I've tried that one before, and I've sat for an hour at one point going, what the hell was that? That was a
yeah. No. You see, that's the danger point. You see, I don't do that. What was that? No, if it hasn't come back by itself,
it wasn't
that
worth
important.
The effort.
Wasn't worth it.
Nice.
It wasn't.
Whereas I just say, set reminder. So there's that generational thing again, Willie.
With age comes wisdom, Angela.
I don't plan to be wise for a while yet, then that's fine.
I say, what to learn, grasshopper?
Done and saying, tell me this in the morning.
It's quite fun everybody saying it about the age thing, because I think that's where the word unplug gets sort of a differential between different age groups. Because for us, the plug was somebody took out of a wall. So we switched it off at night, and that's where the unplug comes from. But a lot of the younger ones that I speak to, unplug to them just means switch off, as in don't do one thing, but do something else. Whereas they don't have that, because you think, how many things are Wi-Fi or Bluetooth now? So you don't actually physically unplug anything. So that's why they don't look at it in the same perspective. Their way of looking at it is like, it's like, I think I did last week talk on, self-care is very like unplugged to me for a lot of people, because it's what do you do to unplug? But all self-care means, people argue with us, and it's like Mary said, I keep hearing these things, or see things written, you have to do that, this is how you do self-care. But if you turn it around, all self-care means is care of self. So it's whatever you want to do. And for some people, I'd said last week, one of the first things I said, and somebody put me for it was if you go to the pub, if that's what your self-care is, go and meet friends, go for a meal, whatever it is. And somebody said to me, is that not a bad thing? You're advertising that we go to the pub. I went, why? If that's what they need, if that's what helps them and makes them feel better, then what's wrong with it? It's just because it doesn't suit one person doesn't mean another. And I think that's the big age gap thing, young ones looking, and I think it comes to that physical thing, because the unplugging thing out is just totally different. I think to them, the meaning's totally different. And even you say to them something about unplugging, they start laughing. Even like you talk about an old phone, and they say about how you dialing something, you talk about dials. I did that to somebody, went, you need to get him a dial, and they went, a what? And I never even thought what I said. They didn't understand what I meant. So I was trying to explain, I used to be a telecom engineer, and I went, you would never believe the noises used to go in the exchange when I was there, and they still couldn't understand. I had to spit for ages trying to explain how a phone worked. I mean, don't be stupid. People stood in boxes and did that with their fingers. I went, how bad does that make you feel? Things like that.
Yeah, and then there was the press button A, press button B.
And press button B to get your money back.
Yes.
But it's that point of going to the pub. That doesn't mean you've got to go and get absolutely sloshed.
That's it.
It could just mean you're going for a meal with some friends. It could be you've gone for a packet of crisps or pork scratchings. Is that your old folk style of things, yeah? And just go for a pint or
Listen to this,
whatever.
old folk.
Hang on a minute.
I had to do it. I'm sorry, I had to do it.
I remember when my brother developed a heart condition, and he was a good man for his pints. He liked his pints. And the doctor said you have to stop drinking. So he just stopped. Like, we thought he had a problem for years. But he still kept going to the pub. He began having cups of coffee in the pub and began having 7-Up. It was the social piece of it, of not being on his own, that had been totally misread for years by everybody. So, the assumptions we make can be very dangerous.
Well, it's the same when it comes to getting people to stop smoking. For a long time, one of the trainers that I had at one point said to me, never ever do the stop smoking thing, because it just doesn't work. And then, you're just disappointing people. And I was like, I don't believe that, because I think that basically what you're looking at is only one part of the issue. And the issue with smoking is that it's a social activity, or it used to be. There's a thing about the whole machination of taking the packet of cigarettes, opening it, or taking the cellophane off, opening it, taking out the cigarette, and all the actions that go with it.
The ritual.
It's a ritual.
It's a ritual.
It's not just a habit, it's an actual ritual. And for some people, it would be a ritual for a reason. And one of those people would be me. I used to do it when I was getting really, really upset about something, and I was going to rip somebody's head off at the neck. And so I would open up a packet. By the time I got a cigarette lit, they were out of danger.
But I think it's also the other aspect of it for smokers is the fact that a lot of folks say, oh, it really calms me down.
Yeah.
Now, is it really calming you down, or are you breathing in for 4, holding, and breathing out for 4 or 7 or whatever else? And actually all you're doing is taking slower breaths.
Yeah.
So when it comes to your mindfulness or your meditation or whatever else, it's all about breath work and controlling your breathing. So you're doing that without realizing you're doing it if you're going and having a cigarette, right?
And you're actually getting a hit of the addiction that you have.
Well, but that's a smaller part to it.
It is a smaller part.
It is a much smaller part.
It's still quite an important part.
It is. But it's so interesting that I remember once many moons ago doing the physical act of smoking was relaxing. It was the impact of the nicotine that had a completely different opposite to the relaxation bit of the act of the smoking process.
Well, let's face it, we were behaviorally conditioned to believe that smoking was good for us. There were doctors in America who were saying, smoke this because it's going to make you feel really good.
There was a Marlboro man, yeah, the big
Yeah,
cowboy.
Marlboro man, you know, if you want
Marlboro Man, yeah.
to cowboy, then smoke Marlboro.
Well, basically, if you wanted to be a big rough tough guy, you had to smoke. And I smoked when I was a copper, but that was I guess, stress relief. When you were at that boiling point, and as you say, ready to banjo somebody, Leslie, stop with a cigarette. I would do it on the way home, hard day, and it was a wee reward. You've had a hard day, you deserve to have something that makes you feel better. Light up a cigarette. I wasn't a heavy smoker, and the whole ritual thing. It was an icebreaker. Oh, you crashing the fags? Would you like a cigarette, or can I light your cigarette for you? And there was a social interaction. There was also, shall we say, in the art of flirting, if you like.
Oh yeah, the chat up line.
The chat up line, and so on and so forth. So it's a whole big thing about smoking. It wasn't just light a cigarette, finish it, and that's it. There was a whole huge thing about it. And we all knew it was bad for us, but we still did it. I stopped because the doctor told me to, which is a very good way of stopping, because he said, if you don't, you become very, very unwell. So that was the way it was. But within reason, if people want to smoke, don't tell them not to.
Yeah,
because as you say, you tell people not to do something, what are they going to do?
Go and do
Do
it. No, don't tell me to do not to
Good
do
word.
it. I'm going to do it anyway.
And it comes to that point of self-care. So if your self-care is a pint in the pub, if your self-care is a cigarette a day, it's not doing anyone any harm. As long as you're not kicking the ass out of it, then what's the problem? You're getting what you need from it. You're unplugging, you're switching off, you're de-stressing, whatever else the other aspects are. But as long as you're aware that you're doing damage to your body, it's all about risk management. You've got to choose what risks are worth taking. And if it is, Leslie, the ritual of opening the cigarette packet stopped her being in the jail because she's not ripped somebody's head off, I think that's a win.
It would have been okay. She just had to have Willie's the nearest cop, give him a fag, and everything sorted.
Yeah.
Two could have walked away and we smoked together. Sorted it.
My dad told me that when he was, I think he was 15, because that was when they pulled them out of the schools and put them down the mines. His dad gave him a packet of Woodbine and a box of matches. There you go, you're a man now, son.
Times have changed, eh?
Times have changed.
It's amazing, isn't it? But this is it, you see. We are generationally, Willie, Tony and Mary and I, possibly you a little bit.
No, I missed the whole cigarettes are good for you thing.
We are of an idea and a culture of understanding that we didn't need the phone, we didn't have that facility all the time there with us, so we were off doing other things, and we had to learn how to use these things in a different way from how people who were born after the innovation became, you know, a household item. It was like kids were born with microchips installed because they already knew, like, they're two and they're taking like selfies and goodness knows what and teaching other people how to work the computers and all the rest of it. We didn't have that kind of thing. We learned it slowly and with a lot of resistance in some cases.
But also when we were learning it as it was coming in, because well, you've mentioned I'm slightly younger than you. I'd left university at the time. Mobile phones really took off, but it was still a very different process. I still remember that I could text somebody without looking at the screen, and that's including pressing the 3 key 4 times to get that letter and pressing the 6 key that number of times. But I got to the habit of I could text so quickly because I'd got used to it, because I was embracing it. But then I suppose from a certain aspect, my dad always embraced technology. So we had computers in the household from a very young age, even if you had to sit there and type for 3 days so you could play a shoot 'em up game that lasted 5 minutes. But you got your 5 minutes of a game out of it because you had to sit and type all the code in.
You got your reward.
Yeah. So we can I learned from that perspective. So I've always been more tech driven because it's always been something in and around my household. But the current tech that's out now, the user interfaces are so different that yes, a 2-year-old can understand it, but the challenge that you've got for the older generations is that they've started on press key 3 this number of times, press key 4 that number. They've got to keep changing what they've learned. And that's the difference. So rather than going straight in at the dead easy option, they've learned as things have gone through BBC computers and whatever other options to get to where they are now. Or not, as the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, I used to stand behind the desk at the reception desk at the vets and say, if it doesn't have a pulse, I don't work it.
Well, I'm not known as a techno dinosaur for nothing, and having a YouTube channel to prove it. Because I think, I remember in school we had slide rules, right? I couldn't work that bloody thing either.
I get no.
I could never use a slide rule.
We had pocket calculators. You were quite posh if you had a phone in your house. And yes, the big red boxes were very useful because looking back at it, how did I ever get a date? How did I ever meet a bird? How did we communicate? And I think it's changed. There's a serious point to this, that if you say you're going to meet outside the Odeon at 8 o'clock next Thursday night, you better bloody be there.
Because there's no other way of sorting it out, right?
There's no other way of sorting it out, because if you didn't be there, if you weren't there, you get a reputation of not very nice reputation. So I think that that ethos, that culture changed quite dramatically, because I read somewhere that yeah, I'll meet you, right? And then they don't bother because they can just say 5 minutes beforehand, sorry, can't do it, right? Ding, 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 ding. And there you go, because there's not that obligation, there's not that sense of responsibility that I can just send them a text 10 minutes beforehand and bail out, which would drive me absolutely insane, I've got to say. But so the tech, yeah, I mean, I've got an iPhone, I do have a computer, I don't have a laptop, I can barely work the whole lot of them, but it's very, very useful. Yes, useful when the pandemic hit, I went on to Zoom, major learning curve with the help of David Logan, the IT geek,
Yeah.
you know. But okay, things progress, and we've gone from having, as Tony said, the dial up thing. So I watched a little skit that they showed it to some kids, you know, an old phone with a dial on it. They said, okay, that's what used to make phone, and they looked at it as if it was something from Pluto. Yeah, and he said that saved our life back in the day. Right, that's how you got talking to your bird or talking to your mates. Right?
You didn't get in trouble for drunken texting.
You couldn't do that. You couldn't send inappropriate selfies and all that kind of malarkey.
This is true.
But yes, progress is good, but it has its downsides. Unplugged to me used to be, right, go acoustic.
Yes.
Right, you just take the plug out the electric guitar. Apparently Bob Dylan, right, did the opposite. He started going electric, and it was nearly World War III.
Yeah.
Done that, and then he had to take the plug out again and go back to being acoustic. Right, so Tony's quite right. The wording, the phraseology is critical, I think, in terms of how we understand it. I remember my dad used to go about the house and pull all the plugs out. If I did that now in my house, I'd be here all night with the Wi-Fi and the telly and the router and the
master switch at the front door.
Well, it's that, of course.
I still unplug most things. I leave nothing on standby in my house.
I used to do that.
But I'm the daughter of an electrician, so that's my excuse.
I did that until I got completely virgin because I kept missing things, or things weren't working right. They said, it's your fault. Do you switch your Wi-Fi off at night? They went, yeah, I switch everything off at night. But that's why, because they would do all their updates at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I've been missing the update. So that's why my system didn't work. And I told them to pieces, and it wasn't actually their fault, it was mine, because I kept unplugging it. And I went, well, nobody said to me not to unplug it. So I've always done things like that. I came from a security background as well, so it was like a security conscious thing. Unplug everything, don't leave it on in case it overheats or anything, especially transformers. So you turned all them off, and yet it wasn't right. And I think that's what it is when I talk to some of the young ones now. A lot of my clients are younger, and when you tell them many things that we did, they just don't understand that. But I think it's a skill that Willie was talking about how you worded things so people would turn up, the way you would explain or the way you would ask them to be there or something, and people would turn up. And I think there wasn't very often, I can never remember when I was meeting people and they never came. But how many times you're out because it's so easily accessible to say no now that people just do that to you, or not, I'll leave you at the last minute, and you're already there, and you're looking, well, you're not here yet, and they go, oh yeah, I'm not coming. But you might find 5-10 minutes after you've already spent an hour traveling to somewhere, and then suddenly there's a message saying they're not coming. We never had that, and I honestly can't, I don't know the rest of these, but I very rarely can remember someone not turning up anytime. I mean, even at a whole group, we'll use us, there were 6 guys that always met to go out. So I can always remember always meeting up all the time in all different places. We never lived near each other. We lived maybe in a 3 to 4 mile radius of each other, but we still met up at the same places. We would connect like that. Kids, if you took all the tech away from us and said, right, I want you to arrange a night out, they don't stand there and have a clue what to do. Imagine just for a laugh, just get them up and stand in the room and say, here.
I might have a try at that with the cadets I work with. That's quite a good challenge to give them.
It's to so they can find there is a skill set. I was doing a talk last week on self, and people keep talking about the eternal triangle, mind, body, spirit, and I said there's 4. It's not 3, it's a square, not a triangle. There's mind, body, spirit, and social. And you mentioned it earlier, Angela, because people forget the other side of it. You can be physically okay, you can be emotionally okay, you can be mentally okay, but if you don't have that social connection, and we've proved it over the last 2 years, there is something missing from human beings. We need that as part of our DNA, or we don't survive. How many people with loneliness do we lose every year because of the loneliness? So we've got to remember it's no 3, there's always 4 corners to that. And it is a challenge to say to young ones now, you're right, I would love to do it as to do a retreat with them, to take them to it and say, right, you have to meet up, but put them in all different parts of the hotel or something. So they're not even in the rooms anywhere near each other, and say, right, how are you going to arrange your nights out, or how are you going to arrange to do something? And like an old orienteering game or something like that, but just give them some, they have to actually learn to communicate verbally without any tech involved.
I did that recently with one of my friends. She has a group of girls who played basketball, and we were talking about the old games that we used to do, you know, the 2 tennis balls against the wall kind of thing, when the lassies used to play ball. And so we talked about it a little while, and she said, I'm going to do that. Do you know that, Leslie? I'm going to do it. And she actually recorded it for me, and it was amazing to see this. These girls play basketball, could not coordinate themselves to put 2 balls off a wall and catch it. It was the most hilarious thing I have seen in a long, long time. It really should go on YouTube. And basically it was so apparent about the loss of skill of hand-eye coordination that actually is now focused on a screen when you're playing video games and etc. That hand-eye coordination is entirely different to when it comes to physical action. And we don't get that anymore.
So perhaps when you're working with clients in future and we're suggesting to unplug, that could be another option that they can try and see how they get on before they then throw the balls out the window and go back to their phones because they're so frustrated.
Again, that's the other thing. It's we are human beings, particularly, are programmed to adapt to survive, and yet there's part of, maybe it's the speed of the progress that's gone digitally that's made it more difficult for people to understand that there is another side to it, that there is another option, and they just don't see it because they have no perception of that. And they don't want to listen to people like us to say, oh, well, in my day, we used to play ball on the wall and we used to play Peaver and stuff like that. That's like Sudoku on the ground. Exactly. See, you know what Peaver is? And that makes me peeved to understand that.
Hopscotch.
Hopscotch.
Hopscotch. Ah, hopscotch.
That I know. Yeah,
I know. I'm just wondering, is it a case of it's not unplugged, but sometimes we actually need to replug or get plugged or plug ourselves in, because the social bit is you're kind of engaging into it, whereas a lot of the unplugged is about pulling yourself away from social stuff and having the proper breathing.
Going for a minute.
I'm wondering where that language, something needs to happen with the language here.
I think the biggest challenge on that one is social media and the fact that when you talk about socials, people are thinking the big organizations with the blue F and the purpley coloured camera or whatever else. And I think it is that point that when you think social now, you are thinking doom scrolling, you are thinking comparisonitis as you scroll through whatever else. You're thinking of, oh, I've started watching a reel and I've kept watching reels and I've lost 2 days because the whole benefit or the whole purpose of these sites is to keep you engaged. So if you are the person uploading content, if you're uploading videos, it's going to get seen by more people because you're staying on the platform. And I think that's the big challenge. So from the unplugged perspective, from social media, and perhaps replugging into a social life. And there was all that talk about second life, wasn't there? Actually, let's have a first life. And whether that is a trip to the pub, a trip to the cinema, whatever else it is, there is that need from an unplug from social media, perhaps, just to help you reset what your priorities are and what you actually want out of life, where you're not looking at Joe Blogs who's been on this wonderful holiday and all the photos of these gorgeous holidays. If I'm posting on my personal page, it's only when I'm away. I don't post when I'm sat at my desk.
Yeah.
I think that the word social is, you're right, Angela, we're looking at social media, right? When we're talking Facebook, Instagram, whatever. My wife put her first TikTok up today and she was really chuffed. But having said that, it was a photograph of I don't know, of a painting she'd done, right? And she had some music in the background and she was explaining the significance of the painting. Very impressive. But the social, as in social media, as opposed to sociability, where you meet people, you go, hello, how are you? And you have that engagement or that interaction, whether it's down the pub or in the park or wherever it is, instead of, I'll just send them a text, or I'll send them a reel, or a voice message. That took my while to get my head around that. So instead of phoning you up, they'll just send a wee message, which is all very nice.
Unless you're sitting in an airport and everybody's sitting around you thinking, I'm not pressing play on this, but I know I need to respond to it.
It's just, why didn't you just bloody phone me?
Yeah.
Why send me a message or an email or whatever it is? Just pick the phone up. Instead of having a Zoom call, pick the phone up, and we'll be sociable.
But the other thing that happens is that when you're actually going out, meeting people and being sociable outside of this modality, then basically you get to understand that what's on your social media isn't always true.
It really is.
It's not law. It's not, people lie. People play with your head and they do things and say things, and particularly when it's trying to pull at your heartstrings so that you'll stay on there and watch the whole thing to the end, and it's probably like an hour long when it would take 2 seconds to do. And to anybody who's not a certain age, basically you can see it's a setup. You can see that it's not true.
But then it goes to FOMO.
And but then it goes to the state of, why is it that people are so, you can see the comments, sometimes look at the comments. I don't have to look at the thing, all I have to do is look at the comments. And it's like, they're actually winding people up to become angry and stressed about something that actually is not what's going on at all. But then nobody actually goes out, I would suspect, and goes to the pub and says, I saw this thing on this thing. Does that really happen?
Oh, I've had many conversations like that.
Yeah, but you're different. You are actually older than the people I'm talking about.
But I've had these conversations with teenagers, Leslie.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I don't do Twitter.
I don't do teenagers.
Don't do Twitter because you'll end up in an argument with somebody and it might be a bloody robot, right? So I don't do Twitter. Apparently there's some appalling stuff on Twitter, right?
Oh, yeah.
That, where there's unconscionable things are said. Things that, were it done in the pub, would result in a major catastrophe, resulting in hospital treatment. But people feel safe enough to do it online. They're the keyboard warriors. We're getting a wee bit away from the unplugged, chilling out things.
We're
Just a bit
right in there. We're replugging. We're getting plugged back in. But
But you need to understand what's going on with these things to understand why it's beneficial to unplug.
yeah.
Mhm.
And is there another way of saying it? Because of, is boundaries a better word? But it does
Switching
mean
off.
fencing in or fencing out, and that again, the language is interesting. The language is changing so fast in what it means and what it doesn't mean, again, along with the digital age.
That's what I'm saying. The actual unplugged word doesn't suit the young generation because it doesn't mean anything like to them as what it does to us. So that it does need to evolve with that, because an unplug is unplugging. What came about because you take something out, and since they don't do it anymore, it's more difficult. I had a young couple. Well, I was seeing the girl, and she was saying to me about the argument they had, that we were talking about being social and does ever do it or go with other people. She had an argument with her boyfriend. She was not in a really bad argument the night before when I had to talk. And I went, okay, and what happened? What did they say? I'll show you. I went, how can you show me if you had a chat about it? Oh, we just did it on the phone. I went, so was he not home? They went, yeah, he was on the other end of the couch. They were actually sitting in the same room. They were texting each other, and they fell out over text because something he said she took the wrong way or something and stormed out the room. So she waited and kept it show me the next day. And I went, that's the kind of thing I could not understand. All I asked them to do was try and talk, just have a conversation. But they even took that as to do it through their phone rather than actually verbally having got, and even though they're in the same room. I didn't know they were in the same place. I thought they were separate places, but they were actually in the same place doing it. But even to them, because it was just the way you said it, have a conversation. They went, well, yeah, to them, a conversation is something they would do on their phone. It wasn't something that we think is two people sitting in front of each other talking. I went, yeah, but look what we're doing now. She went, but that's different. That's what you do for a living. She didn't think that that's something she would do outside. She thought, I would go home and do the same thing and sit and talk to the text or someone next to her. I went, no.
But even the word talking to someone can be misconstrued as voice notes or chat or whatever else.
So that's the bit. How do you then get people to understand what we're trying to convey with this message? Because we're already decided all around the circle way, but the language is what causes the confusion in the first place, depending on the age group of the people concerned.
We're going to have to learn the language so that we can actually go in there and reboot them.
Yeah, but by the time you've learned it, it's changed again, though, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I still think Eric Clapton Unplugged was the best introduction to Unplugged ever. That was my first encounter of the word unplugged. It's the best.
I must admit, it's kind of the first thing I think of is somebody taking the plug out the electric guitar and doing it acoustic.
There's another thing about unplugging, go back to the electrical switch, Tony. Switching off. If you didn't pull the plug out, you at least put the switch to the off.
That's it. Right? Yeah.
But we were told to. We were told to.
Because it was safer or something like that.
Used to say, good night, everybody, and don't forget to switch off your television and take the plug out of the wall. And be very careful that for those of you who are living on your own.
Oh, Billy Connolly.
Very careful.
But then you could just switch off. Something happens. I'm kind of switched off with that. I don't like it. It switches me off. You don't use that as unplugged. So there's an awful lot to, you're right, to insist on language. And again, the generational thing, what we think of as unplugged or switched off would not necessarily, I don't resonate, or not a word I like, with younger generation. My stepdaughter's 27. She's exactly 40 years old, younger than me, which shows my age off. And she says, you are so old, right?
And your response should be, and I'm glad for it.
Right, and I'm quite happy. She said, thanks, sweetheart. Right, so I give her my phone to do something with. She picks the phone up, goes, right, there, sorted.
Actually, does that for me.
You didn't show me how to do it. Well, it's sorted now, so just get on with it. So then
it'll take her too long to show you what to do, so that's why you just want to do it.
And it's a different skill set.
Yeah.
Well,
that's a different skill set. Explaining
I wanted her to just show me. The next time I'll be able to do it myself, rather than knocking the door in 10 minutes and going to do that again. But I mean, to me, unplugging, switching off, whatever, is do something different. Stop your working day. I actually did a wee video with David on this about how to switch off after your work, because with the pandemic, people working from home, the boundaries got blurred because you weren't in the office. You didn't switch your computer off, jump in your car to drive home, walk to the bus stop, and so on and so forth. So you didn't have that delineation of working, commuting, home. And then the vast majority of us didn't do work at home. Now, once you're home, you're home. Family time, whatever it happened to be. But when you were home working, oh, I'll do another extra hour, or that, I'll say me doing it in the morning. And I think there was a study that showed actually people worked more
Yeah.
at home.
They were
Yeah.
living at work rather than working from home.
Exactly, right? So, and then we've got the situation where people have got used to it and they don't want to come back into the office. And sometimes that'll work and sometimes it won't. But the lack of a boundary, you mentioned this earlier, Leslie, the boundary being stop your work. It's almost like the hooter in the factory goes, right? And then every clock's off and they all spill out the factory and they go their separate ways. Right?
Well, you're going to have to explain that to young ones now. What do you mean by clocking off? You just started something else. You're going to have to explain that now.
I worked for a company after university in fact, it was a telecoms company, but they also did time management systems. So I know what Strauger switching is. Does that mean anything to you? Right, there you go. Right, so it was like
That song, Lucky, Lucky Me.
the hooter goes,
Work
And
8
then-
hours, sleep 8 hours, and play 8 hours.
Mm.
And that makes a healthy life. And yet, trying to get people to understand that and to do it is just, even for ourselves, me personally, I well, you know, I could spend 8 hours in the garden quite happily, and it's still work. It's just a different kind of work. But it's actually, you
So
know,
that's pleasure for you,
it's
and
a
that's not
pleasure.
work.
Yeah. So then I come in and do 8 hours of work. But then I don't sleep
Mm.
because I'm still working.
That's my favourite way to unplug, an afternoon nap.
Mm. Yeah, I
Should never
learned,
do
I
that.
learned to do that. So
never
yes,
do that. No.
Yeah, maybe too
I love
sluggish. All these
Love
people
a
seem to
good nap.
energise them. I'd be sluggish if I did that. I
now
couldn't
you're
do that.
starting like our age.
No, I've loved my afternoon naps for donkeys. I used to do them at the weekends. I would have a nice wee afternoon nap. It's like 90 minutes, power nap. But yeah, I think I had one on Monday.
I remember growing up, my father had a 20-minute nap every day between 1:25 and 1:45. Every day. He would go in on Irish radio. There was the 1:30 news. So he would get up from the lunch table at 25 past, take his little portable radio in to listen to the news. He never heard
Never heard
the
it.
news. And we'd call him then at a quarter to 2 to take us back to school.
And
So
why
it's
not,
like,
right?
And that was many years before power naps were even ever mentioned.
So he was the precursor to the power nap.
Absolutely a precursor to the power naps.
The interesting thing is, though, it was only when the technological age came in, the industrial age came in, that we actually did need to be seen to be sleeping 8 hours at night. Because up to that point, people would work, sleep, go out, work, sleep, go out, work, sleep, go out through the 24 hours. They would just wake up in the middle of the night and go out and do some stuff, get tired, come back and go to sleep again. And then they would get up, do their work a little bit, and then they would sleep. They'd have their afternoon nap, their postprandial nap. Then they would get up and do some more work. And it seems that up until about, probably up until about the industrial age, when it got formulated into the 3 sets of 8, that basically it was more free flow as to when people would work and when they wouldn't. If there was daylight, you would probably be up working. Once the sun went down, you would go to sleep. But very rarely would you sleep all the way through from like 5 o'clock in the afternoon in the winter to 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, but then but time and clock watching and all the rest of it are human constructs.
Oh,
We don't need to follow them.
no.
It can do, but you know, thanks to everything's online, there's a lot more people don't abide by the 3/8.
Yeah.
Because they can speak to people anywhere in the world at any time, and because the time zone changes, people are adapting. You saw us the last few weeks, Leslie.
Yeah.
After the last couple of conferences with you, we did Sydney a few weeks ago, and that was like 11:30 at night or 7 in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, I was out of the game, absolutely out of the game for nearly 3 days after that.
Well, that's what I'd say. It was the day after, especially because I'd worked all the first day, forgot it was going to be that night because the dates in their diary were the second and third. I only realised halfway through the day that I'm on at 11:30 again. I worked all day, so I went to 25 hours or something like it was, and then with that day I already had a couple of meetings in the afternoon and then at night. And I struggled after that. And yet I spoke to some people who do it all the time. And then I remembered when I worked in the bank, we had these compliance or governance meetings, they're called, and they were done with all the quality managers from all over. It wasn't just here, we'd the States, we'd Singapore, we'd Malaysia, we'd India. And we had to go to those calls depending what the calls were when they were done. So you worked your time around that. So a lot of people do that as well. I think now, work their time around these kind of calls or work their time around other people's time zones. So they actually will get up 2 or 3, 4 in the morning, whatever, and do the work then, and then have that afternoon time as their time. So I think it's evolving again. It's what they all say, things go around, come around. We're actually getting back to an area of duty, the way the technology is changing, that we're becoming that pre-industrial age thing again, that there is no actually set time to suit that. It's whatever suits you.
I used to do night shift. I used to be on constant night shift, and it got to a point where even now, if I hear next door's phone ring, I'm up. Landline, even. Those things still exist. They really.
Did you still get them?
You can still get them. Not a lot, but you can still get them. But yeah, it's like there are things that happen that you remember habitually. It gets in there, and
muscle memory.
You just come straight up and you're fully awake right away. Trying to get back to sleep sometimes is where it gets interesting. And usually I just give up and just keep going and start working at 6 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning. And then around about maybe just after lunch, I'll just have to hit the hay and go for a sleep.
So you do go for naps then?
You know I go for naps.
It's not just me.
Not just you, no. But then again, I lived in France, and in France you went for naps quite often because you would be out late at night because you would eat later. Because it was too bloody hot to do it, and you couldn't sleep at night anyway because it was so hot. But this is it. You see, there's unplugged, there's switching off, it just depends on what you're doing and what your cycle is at the time. I think it's when we forget to remember that we are only as good as the fuel that's in our bodies and what we're putting into it and what we're taking out. We have to keep and yes, we do have to keep a level of something so that we can keep going. And being mentally frazzled means that we forget to do that. So it becomes a self-fulfilling purpose, which is where we come in. Because then people can come to us and we can say, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I think the bit about self-care that Tony mentioned earlier, not getting enough sleep, that's not a good idea. Eating inappropriately and all that kind of stuff. And I worked shifts on and off during my time in the police. And I certainly latterly when I was getting on a bit, they did not agree with me one iota. But it was something you had to do. But insofar as I had a choice, I worked very hard to get a day shift job, as everybody else did. So, but whatever works for you. So if working late at night, and I tend to eat later and work later at night or watch movies and then get up later because I find it more productive. So having gone through many years of getting up at dark o'clock and then driving to work for whatever time, I thought, no, I'm not doing that anymore. And this is now working for me. I think it's what works for you, whether it's unplugging or switching off or self-care or whatever. As Mary said here, it's whatever floats your boat in terms of compartmentalising, if you like. Seeing that I've done my work. It's me time now. Let's spend time with the kids, with the dog, with your friends, whatever it happens. Whatever. Gardening. I did a wee vlog about gardening. It's a stress reliever. Gardening's brilliant. You get exercise, you're out in the fresh air, you achieve something. That bit of ground there is now dug over, it's weed free or whatever it is. So what's not to like? And while you're doing it, and you're quite right, Leslie, you don't think about other shit because you're down weeding or cutting or whatever the hell it happens to be. So whatever works for you in terms of unplugging or switching off or whatever terminology you want to use, whether it be a smoke, go for a pint, go for a jog, whatever. That's it. It's not this, oh, you should stop doing this, you should stop doing that. It's whatever. And it's taken me a long time to work all this out, because my time was conditioned. You work this shift, you work a back shift, you work an early shift, you're a late shift. Right? And I obviously people still do that. But everyone formulates. I remember in the place, one guy during the night shift who took himself a full meal at 3 a.m. because that was the way he conditioned. I mean, we're talking like frying a chop, potatoes, vegetables, the full biff, if you like.
We did it. I worked for a security company, and I was the security manager at nights. I was a control manager, so I had our controlling staff, and we did that because we would try to explain to people is that we all struggled a little bit with the shift, but it was a sort of promotion thing. So it was only one I could get. I got that job, and I was not going to lose that. When I'll do it, I'll do a great job, but I struggled eating. Then they started this, well, why don't we have our dinner at work? If you think about it, when we get out of bed, we have breakfast. Then you have later on, you have your lunch and dinner. If you're night shift, your breakfast is before you go to work. So that's what we all started doing. We'd have a breakfast meal before we left for work. Then we had what we'd call a lunch, our meal. We had that, but 1, 2 in the morning. We all took turns each, who would bring it in, and another one would cook. And we would just do that. And it seems strange to people. But then you think about it, even going back again, if you look last 30, 40, maybe 50 years ago, even in Glasgow, when we used to have like the fish market, the fruit market, they all guys used to work night shift and then go straight to the pub, because that was their time when they finished work. And the big one in Glasgow is still there, Saracen's Head or Sarahhead in Glasgow. Sarahhead, everybody went to Sarahhead because the brewery would all go down to the fish market, the fruit market. All the guys would go because they had to adapt their body to their time. Other people thought it was weird. The same in London, Spitalfield, they had the same, the pub at Spitalfield Market, where the guys there would go. If worked all night, then they would go to the pub. And it's just, again, it's all about adapting, isn't it? Adapting to whatever you need in your life that suits you. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks.
I think that's the good word, though. And to wrap things up, we are possibly missing a trick here. Instead of saying unplug or switch off,
Adapt.
Mm-hmm. Be an adapter.
No, don't start that, because that will confuse them. Most of them know what an adapter is. So don't say that. Stick to the word adapt. You've got it right, Leslie, with adapt. Shorten it. Adapt is fine.
Adapt is fine, yeah.
Yes.
Adapt and thrive. And
is that adapter the thing you plug in?
There's that going to start plugging again.
Yeah, that thing that means I can listen to my music. Yeah, I need an adapter.
Yeah, right. So we'll just stick with the word adapt. It's much better.
Let's face it, this is what we're good at as human beings. The animal that we are, the species that we are, we adapt to all different kinds of situations. We just have to remember that being mindful of that is being present by adapting to each moment and each time, each section of time throughout the day and throughout our lives, so that we can make self-care a priority if we really want to. We can actually understand that when we are adapting our situation to go along with what's going on in life, then we're also going to be in flow. We're going to be in alignment with things. We're going to be able to actually think, yeah, it was a bit of a breeze actually, because I've done that and I've done this, and this is fitting with me now. It's a bit like possibly the difference between tailor-made and one off the rack. One's going to fit like a glove, the other one's going to fit where it touches. So let's adapt now and see how everybody feels. And if anybody's got any comments about how you switch off, adapt, change.
Or pivot.
Oh God, no, pivot.
Or whatever word you can come up with. Let us know what you would call this.
Meaningful. What's the word that is meaningful for you?
But remember that there are some words that us oldies are going to have explained to us, perhaps. So, until next time, thank you everybody for coming along and having a conversation about the switch thing. And
that thing.
We'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.